Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to FOB TV, the future of business. I'm your host, Kevin Benedict. I'm a futurist and lecturer at TCS, and I want to welcome all of you to the show today. We're going to have fun. Now, for those of you who watch our podcast on a regular basis, you know that we have this series that we're running right now on the future of happiness. And we've been going back and looking especially to talk to futurists from Finland. Why? Again, Finland has been ranked the #1 happiest country in the world 8 straight years. That's incredible. I think the US is like number 64 on that list, all the way and falling. So we've got some stuff we have to learn. So I'm so excited that we were able to connect and be able to listen to our guest today, Hanna Lakkala. Hanna, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yes. And now Hanna is a futurist. She's a development manager at the Finland Futures Research Center and a positive psychology coach. She's located in Tornio, Lapland, Finland, which is way up north in the Arctic region of Finland, where sometimes reindeer outnumber humans, right?
Yeah. Way more reindeers than humans here.
So
Definitely.
A little history here. The town, Tornio, the town received its charter from the Swedish king Gustavus Adolphus on May 12, 1621. And at that time, it was the northernmost city in the world. Wow. And you chose that as your home. You're going to have to explain that. So welcome to the show. Now, Hanna also wrote, I saw this on LinkedIn, I'm passionate about the Arctic region, which is why I returned to northern Finland after 20 years. My roots and love for the northern nature drives my work with stakeholders across the northern regions. We're going to have so many good questions and such a good conversation between us today. So, Hanna, you're also, in addition to all those other things, you're a positive psychology coach. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I got into coaching a few years back. I studied solution-focused coaching and positive psychology. And positive psychology is the scientific study that seeks to understand what makes individuals, teams, communities to thrive. But actually, I call myself futures coach because solution-focused coaching as such is forward-looking coaching. And I felt that in this approach of coaching, even though it's forward-looking, it kind of lack the tools to really explore the futures, the alternative futures, and expanding the perspectives of what's possible. So there I found this bridge between future studies and coaching. So I wanted to build a bridge from my futurist background to something new and meaningful where I could work with individuals and teams and help them to explore their possible futures and broaden their perspectives with the tools and philosophies of future studies. So actually in my coaching, I apply the tools of positive psychology to explore your kind of inner world, your strengths, your values, and the tools of future studies.
That is fascinating because to me, it seems so obvious that those two have to go together.
Yeah, it does.
Because I mean, I imagine and I see from my perspective is that futurists should not just be journalists reporting on trends, but we should be able to look ahead and say, what are the positive outcomes that we aspire to develop? And then actually, as you put, create that bridge to the future so that you can accomplish your aspirations and the outcomes that you hope for. So this is really interesting. Now, you also are going back to school and you're studying psychology to add on top of all that.
Yeah, I enjoy learning new things and, developing new skills. But yeah, human mind, human behavior is really something that's interesting to me. So I'm studying psychology, but I'm also planning to study other things like body-mind connection and nervous system, and apply all these kind of tools in coaching. So human mind, body, nervous system, future studies, combining all this is like super exciting.
I'm a fan of that. Absolutely. And because of the location you're living, there's some long, dark winters that are perfect for studying, right?
Yeah, although in the winter, during the winter months, especially say November, December, January, when it's the darkest, I do sleep a lot. So I need a lot of sleep. So I don't have that much energy to study. Actually, now when we're in the spring, I have way more energy to study and do other things.
So what's the weather like in Tornio today?
It's plus 2 degrees and actually snowing a little bit.
Where the rest of us are starting to see the first signs of spring. You're in a snowstorm.
Yeah, we are actually in a season that we call spring winter. So it's the end of the winter, beginning of spring. And usually at this time of the year, we still have snow. So you can do all the outdoors, skiing, but it's not so cold anymore. And you have way more daylight. So this is the perfect time of the year for skiing. I'm actually heading further up north this weekend to the border of Finland, Sweden, Norway. So like 450 kilometers further up north for backcountry skiing.
Oh, wow.
So this is the perfect time for that because, we don't even have that much darkness anymore, maybe a few hours of darkness.
Yes.
So it's really the ultimate time for outdoors, winter outdoors.
Oh, that's awesome. Here we're in Idaho, we call it the shoulder season.
Okay.
And I don't really know why, but it's like it's not the dead of winter and it's not yet summer. And everything's kind of muddy and wet and melting. And
yeah, we're heading there too.
Yeah. So that comes. And I imagine in Tornio, there's a few mosquitoes at different times of the year.
In the summer? Oh, yeah. Plenty of them.
And that's one advantage of having reindeer around. I guess the mosquitoes can go to the reindeer as well.
Oh, there's even more mosquitoes than reindeer.
So now tell us about your journey as a futurist. I mean, I'm a futurist. I have lots of friends that are futurists. We all seem to have our own journey. And it's not always through academic, pursuits. It's a lot of times is that we got into roles of being focused on emerging technologies and trends for the companies we were working with. And over time, we became kind of focused on that area and then ultimately became full-time professional futurists. But tell us about your journey, Hanna.
Yeah. So I actually ended up as a futurist by an accident. I have my background in geography. I studied geography in Sweden. Actually, I studied in Sweden because I grew up actually bilingual. I was actually born on the Swedish side of the border. I went to school on the Finnish side of the border. My family is Finnish, so I'm kind of a border thing here up north. So anyway, it was kind of natural to me to study in Sweden, obviously. So I studied geography and I actually have quite a few colleagues who are geographers, and it makes total sense because in future studies, it's a lot about systems thinking, right? And it's same in geography. In geography, you try to understand the space and how everything is interlinked. So I kind of developed the systems thinking through my geography studies. And I joined FFRC, Finland Futures Research Center, for the first time in 2010 in my early career. During my studies, I had done my master's thesis in Nepal. So back then, I had this interest for international development, development issues, energy, environment, nexus kind of things. And then I found this position in FFRC's Mekong Energy Research Group we had back then. And that's how I ended up at FFRC. So it was more through my development, environment, energy interest background that I ended up there and ended up then working with the energy futures of the Mekong region in Southeast Asia. And I eventually moved there. So I lived in Laos. I was running our local office there for a couple of years. So
what an adventure.
That's how I ended up working at FFRC. And that's how I started my futurist career. And after that, I worked in different contexts, also in Latin America, in Colombia and Peru. And when I returned to Finland, to Helsinki, before moving up north, I've been working since then in Finland in different kinds of regional foresight projects, business foresight, sector-specific foresight projects, very broad perspective of foresight and future studies stuff.
What a journey around the globe to bring you all the way back. That's so interesting. So what brought you back to the north of Finland? So Finland's large. There's a lot of places you could have chose to live, but you went back to the north part of Finland. Tell us about that.
Because this is home, after having moved around the world for 15 years, actually 20 years, I felt like I was ready to return to my roots. I wanted to live close to family, get back actually to a place I call home. And I guess I just felt like I'm tired of city life. Although Helsinki, where I lived before moving up north, is on a global scale, it's a small town.
Yes.
But at some point, I just started to feel like even Helsinki is too big for me. And I was missing the nature, outdoors, the silence, the peace. Yeah. So then I made my decision that, okay, it's time to return home.
Thank you for sharing that. So we'll be talking a lot about happiness today as part of this series, Hanna. What makes you happy?
Many of the things I just mentioned, actually, living close to family, nature in the north, outdoors, definitely, health, silence, peace. Also, not only having a job at this time, I mean, the economy is not so good here at least, but actually having a job, getting to work with interesting things and with great people. That's something I value a lot, and I'm grateful for that. What else makes me happy? Learning, evolving, developing as a futurist, as a coach, as a human being. I think it's these type of things that makes me happy.
So you didn't mention saunas, but I have to bring up saunas because Finland is famous for saunas.
I love sauna. I just take it for granted, so I didn't even mention it.
So what role does saunas play in making Finland the happiest country in the world?
It's a very important thing to us. It's a kind of relaxation, way to relax. Of course, getting clean and all that. And we have a long history with sauna where back in the days, they died in sauna, they gave birth in sauna. So there's a long tradition of sauna culture and it's really part of our DNA. But it's a place to relax, to calm down. That's the thing that I missed the most while living outside of Finland.
So why do you think it is? So I ask you what makes you happy, but Finland, 8 years in a row, what makes Finns in general ranked so high? I guess the first question is, do you believe the ranking? And number two, why do you think they score so high each year?
Yeah, well, it's twofold. On one hand, I mean, we Finns, we laugh every time we hear that we're the happiest nation. It's like, how miserable is the rest of the world if we are the happiest? Like, seriously? But on the other hand, I mean, especially looking from an international perspective, it does make sense that we rank high on happiness. But I think we need to reconstruct what happiness actually is in this context, in the context of this ranking and questionnaires they have. So it's rather than having this bubbling joy and constant laughter and kind of expressive happiness, I think the survey maps more like contentment and satisfaction. So of course, the Nordic countries would rank high if we think about, affordable healthcare, free education, safe societies, and all these things. And all the other Nordic countries rank high as well. So I think why Finns rank high? Well, I'd say we appreciate peace, silence, nature, outdoors, work-life balance. These things make us happy. We live in a society that's really, equal. It's safe. You don't have to stress that much about basic things like you need to in other parts of the world. So it's these kind of things.
So it sounds like you would advocate renaming this ranking to contentment ranking.
Yeah, something like that.
And the Finns are number one in contentment.
Yeah.
Does that say something more about the Finnish psychology or the benefits of generous social services?
I think the explanation to why Finns of all the Nordics rank number one is our culture and mentality. We're pretty humble. We're satisfied with what is content. And we have this history of being a nation between the Kingdom of Sweden and the Russian Empire. And obviously this history has shaped us. We were kind of in a way colonized or exploited by one side or the other for several hundreds of years. So I think this has really shaped the national mentality of being quite humble and not asking for a lot. But still, we have pretty amazing societies when looking at global scale. But I don't think the other Nordic nations are, I mean, all the Nordics are pretty humble. I mean, none of us are super expressive, I mean, in our happiness or showing emotions, but I think we are quite extreme as Finns in comparison to other Nordics. And this is the reason actually I think we rank number one. But to me it's more about Nordic happiness. Okay. I think it makes more sense to me to talk about Nordic happiness because the other Nordic countries rank high as well. Right. And our societies are very similar.
So if you look at the top 5 in the rankings over the last 8 years, all your Nordic colleagues in the countries all the Nordic countries are in the top 5 every year. It just, Finland just bumps a little bit higher.
Yeah, because we don't expect for, more than what we have, I guess. Wow. But Norway, what's surprising to me is that Norway is on the 7th place. So it's Finland, Denmark, Iceland, Sweden, then comes Netherlands and Costa Rica. And after that comes Norway. And this is really surprising to me. I mean, I've lived in Norway. Yes. So I think Norway is an amazing country. I mean, they have pretty much the same system as we, but they are super wealthy. They have this amazing nature. They do a lot of outdoors. Norwegians became wealthy in just within few decades. They found their oil in 1960s or 70s. They became insanely wealthy in just one generation. So I'm just asking, is this the reason why they're not as content and satisfied that Finns are? They get so wealthy too quickly, so they can't really appreciate what they have. Wow. I don't know if any Norwegian is listening to this. Please let me know what you think. But I'm just asking, what explains that?
Yeah, I can imagine. It's like when we all got social media on our mobile phones, and suddenly you saw that other people had more money or appeared to have more money and more luxuries than you. And suddenly you might have been a content person that's now discontent because now you see what other people might have. And maybe because that door got opened, Norwegians went, oh, there's a big, there's reasons to be discontent.
Yeah. I don't know, but yeah.
So when you look back at the history of Finland, I mean, there must have been a lot of work, and the other Nordic countries, a lot of work over generations, many generations, to set up a society that can rank this high in contentment and happiness. What were some of those decisions that the Finnish society actually had to think about, plan for, and decide on early on that led to this ranking?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Well, Finland developed really quickly after the Second World War. Like when my parents were born after the Second World War, Finland was still a very agrarian country. Like most people lived on the countryside, were like on farms. But after the Second World War, we had to rebuild our country, obviously, after the war and modernize our economy quite quickly. And this happened really fast, I think, because we had to pay off the war reparations to Soviet Union. So this also forced us to modernize our society quickly. And during that time, also, for example, our forestry industry developed, and other industries, they developed quickly. So the quick economic development made it possible to expand the welfare program in Finland, as had already been done or started in other Nordic countries. So I think we follow the neighboring country, Sweden especially. They had started their project, which they called Folkhemmet, like the people's home, was the name of the project that Sweden started in the 1930s, I think. And Denmark also started around the same time or even earlier. So I think we kind of followed what the neighboring Nordic countries did. So once we had developed our country economically, we could also expand the welfare states. Yeah, the question is why did this work in Nordic countries? And I think it's a high social cohesion and trust. This small population, relatively small populations with homogeneous population, at least historically. Of course, this is changing. Especially Sweden has received a lot of immigrants. There's also the strong labor movement traditionally in all Nordic countries. We have this culture of consensus and compromise in politics. So I think these things apply to all of the Nordic countries to kind of explain why we could build, why this system worked here.
Now, I always, and I appreciate you sharing all of that with us. And I think about it as I'm listening to this, and I'm like, can those skills, those programs, the mechanisms and systems that are in place that allowed you guys to have these aspirations and create an environment that delivered on those aspirations, can that be taught? Can that be exported to the rest of us? Because every time you listen to any report, it says the Nordic nations score high, the Nordic nations score high. And the rest of us are like, why can't we be like the Nordic nations?
Well, that's a big question. Well, if you think about the traits or characteristic that makes Finns rank high in happiness ranking, there are probably things like trust, flat hierarchy, equality, connection to nature. So I think it's less about teaching happiness directly. It's more about shaping an environment that fosters happiness through trust, autonomy, empathy, connection, work-life balance. So can it be taught at school? Maybe at some ways, but it's more about shaping the environment. But is it exportable? I don't think so. I think each nation, each country and culture needs to define what a good society means for us. How does it looks like for us? Because cultures are different, the historical contexts are different, values can be different. So exporting a system, this is a system. So exporting a system, I don't think is possible.
So, because when I think about all the characteristics and traits that kind of make up your culture, it would take family and school and history and so much. Well, I understand while that delivers happiness. Yeah. So being the most content country in the world only means it is happier than the rest, right? It doesn't mean it's perfect. Let's talk about the challenges now. Because there's just everybody has a lot of challenges, and we would be remiss if we didn't bring those up. What are the big challenges that Finland faces?
Yeah, I agree. When talking about the happiest country ranking, it's important to remember that we are not a utopian society.
Yeah.
And we need to take this 360-degree scanning of what's going on. And when I think about happiness or unhappiness, we have a lot of depression, alcoholism, suicides, more than actually other Nordic countries. And it's probably the culture of not talking about emotions that much, at least traditionally. It's of course changing also. And it's also explained by the intergenerational trauma, like the war. I just read a research that said basically that it takes 4 generations for a nation to heal its war trauma. And it kind of makes sense. So I think this is one explanation to why we have alcoholism, suicide, and depression, even though the alcohol consumption is also decreasing. But and then there's a lot of discussion about how our youth and children are not feeling well. There's a lot of depression and loneliness, and our mental health services are under-resourced. And this probably applies to many other countries too, especially after the pandemic, or more the pandemic measures that added up to this problem. We talk a lot about how our elderly people are lonely, and that those services are under-resourced too. I mean, our welfare state is facing challenges. Our population is getting older and older, so who's going to pay the taxes to actually fund all these services of the welfare state. And yeah, when I think about loneliness and depression and our elderly and youth that are lonely, and especially looking back at my international experiences living in Latin America and Southeast Asia, what I think about what I've realized after moving back to Finland is that we, not only Finland, but Nordic countries, maybe it applies to most of Northern Europe, I don't know. But we are a highly individualized society, and we kind of lost the sense of community as it used to be earlier, and which other countries still have. I mean, having lived in Colombia, I mean, people are super aware of other people, and in a way that community is very valued. And of course, it makes sense when you look at developing world and compare to so-called developed world, where we're looking at economic development. In poorer countries, you don't have the same safety nets, so you rely more on community. But where is the threshold where economic development leads to individualized societies and we lose the meaningfulness of community and connection? That's something I think about a lot. So kind of we have the welfare state, which is great, which I hope we have in the future as well in one way or another. But we kind of expect the state to solve all of our problems. So it's kind of, you get this, but you lose the other thing.
So when we do look at the positive qualities, Hanna, that Finland has, and that helps it be happy, will these, in fact, do you think, help it succeed in the future in this age of automation and AI and robots and autonomous operations and, social media and disinformation, the whole wave, this tsunami of technology that's sweeping over the world here? Will these traditional characteristics of the Finns be able to survive and support and be helpful in that environment?
Big question. What are the qualities contributing to our happiness or contentment? Trust, connection to nature, flat hierarchy, equality, perhaps also the Finnish concept of sisu. Have you heard about it yet?
Yes, perseverance.
Yeah, the quiet determination and perseverance. Yeah, which also comes from our history, I guess. If these are the qualities contributing to happiness, then I'm sure these are useful, but probably we also need to redefine what a good society look like. What are we striving for? When the world is changing with all the new technology, and we can see the separation that technology is causing. What does it actually mean to be a human? I think it's important to ask that question in this time where technology is, changing everything, the ways we live and interact. So yeah, I think that's a key question. How do we build community, sense of community? What does it mean to be a human? These are, I think, crucial questions.
So if we circle back all the way to one of the earlier questions where I said, why did you move back to the north? Right? It's the peace, the nature, the quiet, all those things. And I'm thinking to myself, that doesn't come from AI and all these other things, at least not directly. I guess those things could be utilized to create more of those things we love and that bring us happiness. So, I guess if there was something that was separating us from those environments that could be addressed through that technology, then that's something we would certainly want to promote. Because when I look at this list of technologies, the stuff we're all reading about in the headlines every day, we see that in every case, these things can both enhance the quality of a human life, but they can also diminish it.
Yeah.
And it's all about us, I really think, looking forward to where our society, the aspirations of our society, and where we say, this is the kind of world that we hope for. Let's make sure that all of this wonderful emerging technology is in fact utilized to give us more of the things that bring us joy, contentment and happiness. And the aspects about all this technology that diminish the quality of human life, how can we manage, control, and diminish those things? I think that's what we're going to end up doing, Hanna. What do you think?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I think the question is, in addition to what does it mean to be a human, the question is how can we utilize these technologies to actually support a good life? I'm really grateful for technology because that allows me to work from here, from where
Yes.
My employer is in Turku in southwestern Finland, and I'm working, all over Finland and globally as well for where I am.
Yes.
I really appreciate this. So how can technology be used to actually serve our societies and individuals without, losing the connection, the human connection and sense of community?
Hanna, thank you so much for sharing your experiences, your insight, your thoughtfulness, your worldview with all of us and our listeners today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was my pleasure to be here.